With the discovery of multiple dead bodies and human remains in various states in the New England area, it's got a lot of people wondering if they're not only connected, but could there be a serial killer on the loose? Authorities have suggested there's no evidence to believe that at this time, but what do the circumstances of these various incidents tell us? We're going to get into some of the details surrounding these 8 deaths. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We have a rather unsettling situation happening in the New England area right now that is sparking a lot of concern that a serial killer may be on the loose. Several bodies have been found in multiple states since March that we need to talk about. And what are the similarities? What are the connections? What are the locations? I'm going to go for you in chronological order, okay? March 6th, the body of 35-year-old Paige Fannin from West Islip, New York, was recovered in the Norwalk River out in Connecticut by the Norwalk Police Department's scuba team and fire personnel. According to Norwalk Police Lieutenant Tomasz Podorski, the river was, quote, flowing rapidly due to the heavy rain overnight. And this is interesting because apparently, according to the Hour, police in nearby Wilton, Connecticut, about 8 miles away, they had contacted Norwalk authorities asking if they could use their department's drone to help them locate a missing person, presumably Paige, who was last seen in that area March 5th. And during this investigation is when she was found. In fact, clothing and personal items were reportedly found near the bank of the river. A GoFundMe has been set up in Paige's memory. We're going to put it up here for you, and it reads in part, Paige has left behind 2 amazing parents, 2 sisters and 1 brother, along with many more family members to mourn. If you had the honor of knowing Paige, you would know how deeply she cared for who she loved. Due to the loss of someone so young, no family is ever ready for something like this. With that being said, I ask whatever you can contribute to help, even if it's just spreading the word, would be of great appreciation from her loved ones. Next up, also on March 6th, by the way, we have currently unidentified human remains that were found by a hunter in a wooded area near Route 3 in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So this is approximately 180 miles away from Norwalk. And when I say unidentified, I mean we don't know right now even the age or gender of this person. According to Boston 25 and Boston.com, a police report indicates that authorities found a human skull with nasal and jaw portions missing, and that this skull was found under leaves. It was reportedly, quote, green in color and appeared to be weathered. This is according to a police report per Boston.com. And also, Boston 25 reported that this sparked interest from the families of 2 missing women, Sandra Crispo, who vanished 5 years ago, and Brittany McCormack, who disappeared in July of 2021, but nothing to indicate at this point that the remains belong to either woman, but you can understand how there might be some interest here. And also very interesting about the skull. Now we fast forward to March 19th. We go to Groton, Connecticut. This is about 80 miles east of Norwalk, and we have the remains of another unidentified person. However, authorities believe that this is a female. This is a woman between the ages of 40 and 60, with News 8 reporting that this person had light pigmented skin who may have also had Turner syndrome. And that's when a female is born with 1 missing or partial X chromosome, and that can result in features like a short stature, a short wide neck, as well as a reduction in ovary functioning. And these remains were found in a suitcase near a cemetery. And then we go to the next day, March 20th. We're now in New Haven, Connecticut. So it's about 150 miles away from Plymouth, 50 miles from Groton, and a little over 30 miles from Norwalk. According to police, this is where the remains of 59-year-old mother Denise Leary are discovered in a wooded area behind a house, and they were apparently in a state of advanced decay or decomposition. However, the Office of Chief Medical Examiner did confirm that the body was that of Denise. According to WFSB, Denise had been missing since September 20th, 2024, and had last been seen at her home and apparently had been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Mass Live reporting, though, that the investigation has not indicated this is a homicide. March 26, Foster, Rhode Island. So now we're almost 90 miles from New Haven, approximately 50 or so miles from Groton, and around 120 miles from Norwalk, again, just for reference. This is where the body of 56-year-old Michelle Romano was found in a wooded area 8 months after she disappeared and was reported missing by a family member. And investigators confirmed they were looking into the, quote, suspicious circumstances surrounding her death, with WJAR reporting that authorities searched a home in Warwick, Rhode Island that was thought to be the last known address of Michelle. WPRI reporting that Michelle was considered by friends to be generous and a loving and devoted mother of two. A Facebook group had been set up for Michelle as well. There's a post from April 1st that reads in part, quote, yesterday our family received the devastating update that Michelle had been found, and we will never ever let Michelle be forgotten. And the post encourages anybody with information to reach out to the Rhode Island State Police. Hey, just want to give a shout out to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law and Crime YouTube takeover. Now, Morgan & Morgan is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they have so many? Because they win a lot. In the past few months, Morgan & Morgan secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta, and not to mention $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered them a mere $5,000 in that case. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. The whole process can be done from your phone. So if you're hurt, visit forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover. Click the link below or scan the QR code on screen. Now we go to April 9th. Unidentified human remains were found in Killingly, Connecticut. So that's less than 10 miles from Foster, over 80 miles from New Haven, and a little over 40 miles from Groton. They were found, according to ABC6, on a dead-end road by a body of water. And then, the next day, April 10th, Framingham, Massachusetts, about 50 to 60 miles from Killingly, 60 or so miles from Foster, and almost 100 miles from Groton. Firefighters find human remains near the Massachusetts Turnpike while fighting a brush fire. The district attorney's office indicating, quote, the preliminary information indicates that the remains may have been there for several months. And, quote, information gathered at the scene does not indicate foul play. According to Metro West Daily News, the remains were sent over to a forensic anthropologist at the office of the chief medical examiner. And by the way, I should tell you, after I conducted 2 interviews about this, and I'm going to play them for you in a minute, an 8th body was discovered. Real quick on that, according to the New York Post, this unidentified woman was found this week off of a bike path in Springfield, Massachusetts. No cause of death. The New York Post saying the person was unresponsive, and authorities indicating they are working to confirm some more details about this. But here's the thing. Authorities generally have indicated that these investigations are ongoing, and they haven't released details about the causes of deaths and asserted there doesn't seem to be a link to all of these deaths. For example, the Connecticut State Police released a statement to People magazine, after the remains were found in Killingly that, quote, this investigation is in the early stages, remains active and ongoing, and there's no information at this time suggesting any connection to similar remains discoveries actively under investigation by CSP or other Connecticut law enforcement agencies. And the statement also said there is no known threat to the public at this time. Groton, Connecticut Police issued a statement that said, in part, regarding references circulating on social media about incidents in the state of Rhode Island, we currently have no information connecting those events to any of the incidents in Groton. And Groton Police Chief Louis Fazaro told WTNH on April 11th, I would tell people, don't rush to judgment. In relation to this 8th body, Springfield Police Department spokesperson Ryan Welsh also indicated there's no evidence at this time to suggest that the body is connected to any of the other deaths or other human remains that were found. But what have we seen? A lot of online chatter about a possible serial killer in New England. In fact, there are Facebook groups that have been set up to address this. One is called New England SK that has almost 16,000 members, and another has almost 65,000 members. And while, of course, public vigilance and discourse and information is very important, particularly when there's few details and these are active investigations, obviously there's also a concern about whether this could lead to false leads or false reports or anything that could hinder or affect or impede an investigation. So what do we make of all this, right? Well, I'll tell you what, I conducted 2 interviews on this case. Again, this is before the discovery of this 8th body. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to play both of them for you right now. First up, we have Luke Hajdasz, New London, Connecticut Bureau Chief from WFSB-TV 3. And he provided some information about what we know, what we don't know. But what he really did, something in particular, he provided one really interesting update regarding a suspicious person. Luke, thanks so much for coming on. I know you've been following this case or series of cases. We'll talk about if there's any connections. But the first thing you told me about is the geography and how we might think one law enforcement agency is connected to another, but it's really not. Can you correct the record when it comes to Groton?
It's confusing. So even people here get confused. There's Groton City and there's Groton Town. 2 different police departments, 2 different governments altogether. So Groton City is the one that had that big investigation of that condo last week. Groton City is the one that had the remains found at the cemetery last month. Groton Town is the one that we talked to who said, hey, we're not getting any indication that all these calls that we've been getting and everything is all connected. So it's 2 different separate investigating agencies.
From your reporting, have you seen any connections? Has any member of the various law enforcement agencies, have they said there's any connections? Talk to me about what you're learning.
Not yet. I mean, it's easy to jump to conclusions. You see the posts online. A lot of people think there is, but nobody's called me. Nobody has told me anything that makes me think personally that there is any connection. Law enforcement says, listen, we're all investigating all of these. Remains cases take a really long time to investigate, especially if you don't know who the person is. The one over in New Haven, we just learned yesterday, they don't think it's a homicide. So it takes a while to go through these things because those ones are a while back. So as the pieces all come together, we'll learn more. But right now, I'm not seeing anything.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we can't automatically assume these are all homicides, right? There could be other manners of death that are at play here. Have you learned anything about causes of death with respect to any of the bodies?
Here in Connecticut, New Haven, yesterday I just checked in with them. They said no indication that it's homicide. They're still working on it. Danielson and Groton, they haven't even identified these people yet. So we haven't even gotten anything back from the chief medical examiner's office, never mind police, about what caused those 2 remains to show up.
Have they given you any indication about when they might have answers regarding, they might not know what the identities are. They might have to work with forensic anthropologists on this, but any idea about when we might have more information about the identities of those remains?
Good question. I mean, it takes weeks, especially if they don't know who these people are. So right now in Groton, at least that's the one I'm most familiar with, they're asking for the public's help just to find out who this woman is. Never mind, cause or anything like that. So weeks at least.
For the families of those who have been affected by this, because we do know the identities of some of these bodies, have you had an opportunity to speak to the families? Do you know how the families are doing? And overall, let me just ask you, the community in general, how are they reacting to all this?
Yeah, I mean, here in Connecticut, we haven't spoken to family because most of them are unidentified. I know most of the identified ones have been over in other states, Rhode Island specifically. But really, everybody's asking the same question that you are right out of the gates here is, are these all connected? Do we need to be worried? And again, right now, all indication is no from police. What it plays out to be in the end, we'll see. These things take time. But as of right now, everybody's really just asking those same questions. Is this connected? Do I need to be worried? No one knows.
And are people talking about it? Are people concerned?
Oh, all the time, all the time. There's Facebook groups that are growing to the zenith of the universe, new members all the time, people posting every body that's found in a river, body found in an apartment complex all across New England. Half of them turn out to be suicides or a homicide that's very explanatory, can be explained well. Whether or not they're all connected, again, who knows?
These areas in Connecticut that we're talking about, have you ever seen other bodies, other remains being found in those areas? Because one of the things I interviewed another guest about this, and I was wondering, could this all be connected, or are the locations that we're looking at, unfortunately, are these remote, abandoned, or specific areas where over time, this is where people have buried bodies or disposed of evidence or disposed of remains. What can you tell us about those locations in Connecticut?
The one up in Danielson, Northeast Connecticut, much more wooded area in a neighborhood towards the end of a street, lots of woods around it. Kind of seems like the place you would want to dump a body if you needed to. In Groton, it was right on a main road, Mitchell Street, right at the start of a cemetery. There's a large opening to the cemetery that people drive through to get in, and it was found to the left of that, right near the front of the road, right across the street from Cumberland Farms, right across the street from a neighborhood, right in the middle, right in the open in front of everybody. Not the place you would expect to hide a body versus Danielson way up hid in the woods.
Do you can you share a little bit more detail about how these remains were discovered?
Yeah, the one in Groton, none of the media even knew about, ourselves included. We got a release from Groton City Police the day after that said, hey, yesterday we found these remains at the front of the cemetery right on Mitchell Street there. So everybody was playing catch up, all Connecticut newspapers, all Connecticut media, going afterwards, just shooting video of the area, talking to neighbors, saying, hey, did you see anything? As they said, oh, yeah, there was a truck here, a tape here for a few hours yesterday afternoon, and we weren't really sure what they were doing. And then that really sparked the storm of everybody speculating.
Mm. Now, Luke, while I have you here, I also want to ask you about the incident at Bluff Point State Park. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So Bluff Point State Park, post goes online like wildfire, spreading in all the Facebook groups about a guy who says he was hiking. He sees kind of a suspicious man behind him. He's got his hood up. It's kind of a rainy, dreary day. And he starts chasing after the guy who makes the post, he says. He makes it back to his car. He says the suspect had a switchblade. He says he's able to get away. He calls Groton police. Groton police say, hey, listen, that's a state park. It's technically the jurisdiction of ENCON, which is Environmental Connection, or Connecticut State Police. You got to talk to them. We did get a copy of that call, and in the call that he makes to Groton police, he never mentions a switchblade on it like he does online. So they're still looking for this suspicious person. The suspicious person was never caught. Whether or not that has anything to do with it, a lot of people speculate as well, but no indication of that quite yet either. But that definitely got a lot of people talking.
Just another eerie detail in what is an eerie series of events. We're going to keep a careful eye on it. I know Luke is as well. Luke, if everybody wants to follow your reporting on this, or just your reporting in general, where can they find you?
Yeah, Luke Hajdasz TV, Facebook, Twitter, all those fun places, WFSB.com. Have at it.
Luke, thank you so much. It was good seeing you.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, next up, I spoke with Dr. Peter Valentin, who's an associate professor and chair of the Forensic Science Department at the University of New Haven, and also a retired detective, to get his take. Thanks so much for coming on here on Sidebar. I think this is the first time you've come on, so I appreciate it.
It is. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
What do you make of this? What do you make of the timing of the discovery of these bodies, the location of the bodies? What are your first thoughts?
Well, I think first off, finding 6 bodies, finding 6 sets of remains over the course of 2 months.
Possibly 7, by the way. Possibly 7 now.
Yes. Depending on what article you read, the number varies, right? So if we can say at least 6, that's a lot. And they're not in the same area, right? They're Rhode Island, they're, all along the coast of Connecticut. So what does that tell you? Are police being given tips? How are they being told to search? Because this is not something that's being done routinely. So what's directing them to even begin the search in the first place? Is this all part of the same investigative process, right? Is it one set of tips that's leading multiple jurisdictions to begin in the same search effort? Or are these multiple tips from different investigative efforts leading different agencies, and they're all discovering the same thing? And clearly we don't have answers to those questions yet, but those really begin to bear on whether or not we're looking at different offenders engaging in similar acts that we're right now thinking could be a serial killer, or this is in fact potentially a serial killer. We just don't know that part yet.
Do you think the agencies are coordinating with one another, the different local law enforcement agencies?
If they might not have been in the beginning, they certainly are now with all the attention that this case or these cases have had. In a densely populated area like we are here in New England in the Northeast, the communication can be good. But, there are jurisdictional challenges. There are issues with state lines. There are issues with simply agencies not recognizing that there are similar crimes that happen some distance away that you might not be aware of. So sometimes elevating crimes like this to the public consciousness has an effect that makes things move forward. And in particular, when you have cases like this, knowing that you have similar crimes in other jurisdictions makes a big difference, because in most cases, what you're doing is you're exploring the relationship between your victim and your offender. And that's where your investigative leads come from. And that's what you're trying to supplement or support through your forensic testing. When you have a situation like this, where you find a set of remains in a wooded area or wherever it happens to be, you might not even know who your victim is. And so you're surely not going to understand what the potential relationship between your victim and your offender is. And, the mystique, if you will, of a serial killer is there really is no relationship between your victim and your offender. And so a lot of the investigative techniques that you would look to, employ really don't begin because there is no relationship. So knowing that across multiple jurisdictions, you have potentially the same offender can allow you to pool what limited information you have, so you have just that much more to go with.
Is it strange that we don't know at the time of this recording the causes of deaths for all these individuals? I mean, again, and what's difficult about it, there's some unidentified remains. There are some, the bodies that were found in a certain location, others in a different location, but we don't quite know the circumstances surrounding their deaths, the causes of death, the manner of death. Is it strange we don't know that yet? And when would that information be released?
Sadly, this is not surprising in situations where you have, severely decomposed remains. So absent skeletal trauma that would make, the cause of death abundantly clear, you might not know, right? When a body is recently deceased, your ability to make a more thorough examination is much better. And the longer the time elapses between death and discovery, your ability to conduct a thorough examination just isn't there. And so when the remains are skeletonized or closer to that state than they are at the time of death, your ability to make that precise determination just isn't there. So that's another challenge here, because if you can't really determine cause, manner becomes difficult too. Mm-hmm. Now, medical examiners, face these challenges all the time, and so that's their area of expertise, and so I defer to them in how they make those decisions. But certainly as investigators, we have a role to play in supplying them with information about the scene so that they can make the best decision possible, because sometimes the scene information is valuable to them in making those decisions. But no, it's not surprising to me, given for some of the victims, how long was it that they were reported missing, and 8 months later their body was recovered. When you have that kind of time difference, it's not surprising at all. It's unfortunate because it's an investigative challenge, but it's not surprising.
And just for our viewers and listeners, when we're talking about manner of death, we're basically saying is something, a homicide, was something an accident, those kinds of things, different than cause of death, obviously. Now, one of the things that struck me is it possible these deaths are connected? You look at similarities in the victims, you look at similarities in when they went missing, how they were found, the time period, the location, or is the areas where these remains being found, is this just, and I hate to say this, is it just advantageous to dispose of bodies there? These are places where there might be no connection, but assuming there are all crimes, right? People found these remote locations and said, oh, this is a prime opportunity to dispose of remains. I mean, I wonder whether or not that's what could be going on.
You bring up a great question, and this is where my expertise as a forensic scientist and my adherence to physical evidence is really, this is where it's paramount, because it's so easy to look at the idea that, oh, these are wooded areas, and oh, they were looking at the same demographic of victim, and then slip into this notion that it must be a serial killer, or if we find out later that they were all manually strangled, and so therefore it must be a serial killer. And I can understand that logical leap that we're making, and I'm not even saying that I wouldn't make it too, or at least I wouldn't consider it as a possibility. But for me, I'm driven by physical evidence, and the only way that I would ever get to that decision is the existence of physical evidence across multiple scenes that would connect a person to multiple scenes. You wouldn't get through it through MO, modus operandi, right? The way that the crime is committed, unless it was so extraordinarily specific that, the conclusion was inescapable. But what I'm talking about is, do you find physical evidence, and generally we're talking about biometric information, right? Fingerprints, DNA in a biological fluid, even more specifically, that connects the same person to multiple locations. And I'll say it even goes further than that, because depending on how frequently trafficked these locations are, imagine if it's a hiking trail. Would it be unreasonable to think that you would have people visiting more than one hiking trail in a densely populated area like the Northeast?
Good point.
Right? And so if what we're doing is we're collecting the garbage around the area where a decedent is discovered, which is exactly what we're doing, would we find potentially the DNA of the same person in multiple locations? And if that DNA is simply being recovered because it's, the DNA from somebody drinking from a bottle, we can't come to the conclusion that that must be that person simply because their DNA is found at multiple sites. We've got to take it one step further. And so in cases like this, we're going to lead with the physical evidence, but we've got to do it with a little bit of caution, that we don't want to overinterpret the physical evidence. We want to make sure we're understanding what its meaning is and what its limitations are.
I just want to follow up on that. How does it work in terms of, let's say, for example, at one of these scenes, they find some sort of biological or forensic material that links to an individual, potential suspect. Is that immediately shared with the other agencies? I mean, how do they have that coordination in terms of what was found at one scene versus another?
Well, yes, certainly that information would be shared across agencies, because if you have, let's say, if we're talking about DNA, if you had an unknown male profile that you had, recovered from an item of evidence, well, now you can recognize, hey, I also have an unknown male DNA profile recovered from another scene. Now, those can be compared case to case. So we might not know who the offender is, but we recognize that we have the same profile appearing in multiple cases. So you can make a case-to-case hit. And that's, quite valuable, because now we can recognize we potentially have the same offender. Now, this gets even more valuable when we're dealing with it's coming from a biological fluid and not simply coming from, the discarded materials that we're picking up at the scene. Because biological fluids provide you with context, right? They get there for very specific reasons, as opposed to us randomly picking up items from the vicinity where the remains were recovered.
Mm-hmm. And talking about the remains, I wanted to get your opinion on this. The skull that was found in Plymouth, Massachusetts, that's missing a portion of it. Boston.com reported that it was collected by the Massachusetts State Police. It was sent for forensic analysis. I'm curious about what the tests that are being conducted upon it. What do they do with it? They talk about it being green. They talk about it being weathered. Do they match it to missing persons that are out there? And it kind of goes to a larger question about the unidentified remains. What really should we expect to come out of this?
So, so this is where you want to engage the services of a forensic anthropologist. And so states should have a relationship with somebody with that specific area of expertise. But what I can say is that, so if you have, moss or something like that growing on a skull, that's certainly indicative of some kind of growth cycle. So is that a seasonal, is that a growth cycle? So how long has the skull been there? So the bleaching of the skull suggests that it's been there for a period of time for that to have occurred. There are, let's say, brackets of time that you can then associate with how long the skull has been there. So when you have a missing persons case for a long enough period of time, there's a database that you can enter this information into so that it can get shared nationally, and there's resources that become available to you. And so one of the most important things that you can do is you can begin to upload ante-mortem records. And so dental records, it might not be immediately available, but certainly if you're uploading or you're aware of who's missing, now we know that we can get potentially ante-mortem, radiographs like x-rays. Like you're going to bring everything to bear that you can to try to make an identification. So most of us have had dental x-rays done. Those are generally pretty good sources of information to make comparisons. you're going to do everything you possibly can. You know, there's generally DNA found within the home that you can bring to make comparisons. Demographic information can be gleaned from an anthropological examination of the remains. You're going to do everything you possibly can to try to, you know, at least narrow down who could this be, because an incomplete skeleton is incomplete, and therefore you're not going to be able to go very far with just that information. And now the other part that you have to think about is that depending on how long those remains have been there, there's also what's called scavenger activity, right? So that animals are going to, you know, potentially take and redistribute the remains, and so you might have an incomplete set of remains.
Doctor, look, you heard law enforcement. They say don't jump to conclusions. There's nothing at this point to connect these different incidents, but you're seeing people online who are concerned. There are people who are already speculating about whether or not there could be a serial killer, and I can understand why they're saying that. But based on everything that you have seen, and I know you don't have a full, complete picture, I know you haven't individually investigated these incidents, do you think there is cause for concern, though? Do you think there could be something here? Or is what you're seeing right now potentially just, unfortunately, isolated incidents that are being grouped together? I mean, again, I know it's a tough question, but I just want your, before we conclude, if we're talking about the potential of a serial killer, what is your analysis at this point? And obviously, it could be subject to change.
I'll say that I'll give you a little bit of my thought process here. So some of the cases that are being grouped together here are so radically different from the other cases that I don't think you really should include them. You had one that, you know, was basically a missing person from Long Island that was found in the water off Long Island Sound. And so that was included, at least in the initial count. And that's so dramatically different from how the other remains were found that I don't think you really should include that, because it's a very different kind of missing persons case. So I can't say no, you couldn't have that kind of case, meaning a serial killer or somebody committing multiple offenses. But I think what we see here are people trying to include offenses that might not have all the indicia of them being similar. Now, all that being said, let's cast a wide net, because offenders do change the way that they commit crimes. And, let's not look at such strict categories like demographic and dump site and, the type of things that we learn from pop culture and TV and movies as how these offenders commit their crimes. So am I straddling a line here in the answer? Absolutely. Am I gonna let my actual answer be guided by physical evidence? Absolutely. If they're not related, then no physical evidence will exist to connect them.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair and appropriate and reasonable response to what we're seeing. And look, it's an important discussion. No matter what the situation is, these are people's lives, and their families and friends and the public deserve answers as to what happened. And hopefully we get those answers sooner rather than later. Dr. Peter Valentin, really appreciate you coming on here and the work that you do as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jesse. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go. Hard to know what to make of all this. We're definitely going to keep a careful eye on it all. And let me just say, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts are with all the families affected by this, whether or not these incidents are connected or not, but just really, really unfortunate situations all around. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.